Hello, hello, and welcome to Thinking Outside the Soil. I'm your host, Sean Short, and thank you for being with us on this beautiful day. Today's episode is for the people raising broilers who care about finish time, feed efficiency, and results that actually show up in the flock. I'm talking with Jessica Jackson in West Texas, and I found her on TikTok after she posted videos about feeding sprouts. And the more we talked, the more I realized there was a real thing here we're slowing down for. Jessica is raising broilers and she's using sprouts in a practical way and seeing a response in her birds that most people would dismiss too quickly if they just heard it secondhand. So rather than me tell the story for her, I'm going to let Jessica walk you through what she's doing, what changed, and what broiler growers should pay attention to. Welcome, Jessica. I really appreciate you being here on the show. Would you mind giving the people maybe just a short version? Like, what birds are you raising and what made you start feeding out fodder in the first place?
So I actually learned about fodder back in 2013. We had somebody come in and we were putting some berms in place to put some trees in, put some permaculture in place so that we could produce fruit. And the guy that came in had a friend with him, and he introduced us to sprouting barley and
Okay.
showed us a system of stacking buckets and drilling holes, and you soak the grains and just kind of walked us through it. And we tried it, and it was good. I've been very off and on about the last probably the 5 or so years after that. I was kind of off and on because, I was working full time. But once I began raising meat birds and selling them, meat birds being chickens as well as turkeys. I do both.
Okay.
Turkeys are very seasonal. Chickens are almost year round. I wanted to have a good source of nutrition for them. I like to buy feed that's manufactured feed, go to my feed store and buy feed, but I don't think it has enough nutrition in it. I don't think that
Mm,
it's supposed to be a complete feed. That's not how I view it. I think that we need
yeah.
to do more to fill in the holes. I think that the companies do the best that they can, but it just to me it's not enough. Birds are supposed to be out eating fresh, eating grazing, and so I really enjoy getting to offer the fodder, the sprouted grains to my birds. I started with barley. I have changed to, since I sprout outside, I changed to what will work in the season that I'm in. And so I tend to
Okay.
rotate grains throughout the year to see what is most successful. Sunflowers actually will sprout almost year round. They may not grow year round, but they will sprout year round. And then I'll alternate between barley and Milo.
Do you have any other ones that you throw in the mix or you just kind of rotate between those three based on the seasonality?
Based on the success of it, I stick to those. I have tried wheat and oats as well. They're a cool season similar to barley.
Hmm.
Barley is much easier to germinate. It's faster. It grows as long as the conditions are right, of course, which right now it's really good. And over the winter, it was really good. We had just optimal temperatures and conditions. But based on the things that have worked or not worked, if I've had grains that I tried, if they didn't germinate, they'll rot. You know, if they
Hmm.
because if they don't grow, they have to do something. They'll sour. And so I learned through experience to do barley in the cooler season and then to do Milo in the warmer season. And I do sunflower year round because, thank goodness, I water at least once a day. In the hot weather, I'm going to water twice because they're outside, even though they're in the shade, depending on our summers, it can be 95 or it can be 105. So they do require to keep the water flowing, to keep them fresh, to protect the integrity of the plants, the roots. I water twice a day.
Now tell us how you're growing sprouts.
What I'm doing right now, if you are familiar with the baked molasses tubs people use for their cattle, that usually it's a baked
Yes.
molasses product. It's going to have Some might have urea, they're gonna have a protein. Anyway, the tubs, once the ranchers are done with them, oftentimes they throw them away or they go somewhere. Well, that's what I use. I use the ones that are 125 pounds. They're shorter. They're about 23 inches in diameter. They're probably 18 inches tall. Because I don't sprout that much. I do a scoop of each grain that I'm using, which a scoop is going to be 4 cups. And so um, to soak my grains, I'm going to use 5-gallon buckets, but to actually grow them, to allow the grains to spread out, to have room, I use the tubs. And so they're 23 inches across, and I actually have them covered. I have them covered with a wire grid because when you introduce your chickens to fodder, they realize how good it is, and they will hop the fence and they will come scratch it, and they will ruin it because they will eat it and they will do everything, that. So I have to cover it, which my chickens have figured out that I do that, so they don't do that quite so much anymore. But um, chickens, you're not really going to keep them in a fence unless they really want to be in the fence. They're going to
Yeah.
hop and go wherever. But they do. They'll come get in the fodder, and um, because it's delicious. They love it. They will stop what they're doing to come find it.
Yeah, I've seen that with ours too. We joke around our parts. We call ours chicken crack because literally as soon as they
Yeah.
they see it or they see what they know our growing mechanism and our apparatus and the habits and the
Mhm.
routines. So I imagine yours do as well, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I actually am going to be upgrading and changing my system this year. I'm going to be getting more of a hydroponic type system.
Okay.
What I have is great, and it has been effective, and it has worked for the last. I started with just stacking 5-gallon buckets and sprouting just a little bit. And, once you grow fodder, if you have very many birds, you realize you need more than just a few handfuls. I probably have, right now, I have about 270 broilers, all different ages. I
Okay.
have about 50 or 60 ducks. I have my 4 geese. I have about 45 or 50 chickens that are in my laying flock. And so, if they're all going to get some, I need to produce more, which is the reason why I'm upgrading. Um, I began I began selling chicken at the farmers market back in 2023. I had a full-time job until then, and I've raised chickens for years. But then now that I don't have a full-time job, and I'm looking for a direction to go. My hobbies became something that I could monetize and I could make money and I could bring to other people. And so, seeing the value in my fodder system and growing, I'm going to be changing and upgrading to, instead of a 23-inch across round plastic tub that I drilled holes in, which they're great, they've worked. I'm actually going to go to a 2 by 4 foot flood tray, and they'll have 4 of the microgreen sprouting trays per tray.
Do you grow just a single grain in your SS tubs? Oh, I do a mixed grain. I actually do a double stacked 5-gallon buckets as well with the holes drilled in the bottom.
Mm.
And then we have several different ones in multiple buckets when our flock expands, flocks do. And we actually mix our grains together and then spread them out like that. Have you found? Or is there a reason why you do just a single grain, or have you experimented with doing the double grains?
Um, just it's based on what has worked for me. I may try to add in. The main thing for me, I would say, is probably 2 points. A is what has worked for me, and B is what do I have access to.
Yeah.
For example, the barley, I have to order it. Have you heard of Azure Standard?
Yes, I have. They're a great company.
They're based out of Oregon, I believe, and you can buy groceries from them. Well, I buy my barley from them. I used to have access locally to just plain whole barley. I no longer have access to that. The
Mm,
suppliers, the wholesalers that supplied the people here no longer carry it. They'll get me steam flaked barley, but that's not going to sprout. So
no.
that doesn't work. And so it's mainly what's worked for me and what I have access to.
Yeah, access is always a challenge. I've rotated through different suppliers from the same thing. I have a local person here who does like reclamation seed and pasture seed and livestock.
Mm.
crops
Mm.
and stuff like that. They've been a really great resource, but every now and then I find myself having to go get like, de facto livestock stuff. And yeah,
Yeah.
you have to really read those labels carefully. It's like, oh, has this been steamed? It's not going to
Yeah.
sprout. And so that's a good thing to
Yeah.
bring up. I do work with a
Yeah.
few barley suppliers, so maybe offline I'll uh, just forward some of those to you to see if those might be good resources for you too through the
Yeah.
thick and thin of
Yeah. That'd be
accessibility because
great.
I know how challenging that is. We have a lot of wheat growers up here in Colorado, and so we
Mhm.
get some good weeded stuff. And I know you mentioned earlier when we were chatting before the show, you choose your grains based on kind of availability and regional
Mhm.
accessibility, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of sunflower and sorghum growers or milo growers down in your parts.
Oh. So I have tried 2 different suppliers on the Milo, and I actually it's all gonna be regular whole feed Milo, but I found that some will sprout and some will not. So I actually
Hmm,
wasted 200 pounds of Milo a few years ago because it wouldn't sprout, and I soaked it correctly, I watered it, and it never grew. So it's
hmm.
just, trial and error, finding out what's gonna work and what sources are best.
Yeah, it's always the hard learned lessons of sprout. You pretty much after you got shown kind of the barley and all of that back in 2013, it sounds like it's been really a self taught venture for yourself.
I did. I did, at that time, we were able to get barley locally and kind of troubleshooting and learning and experiencing and, because at that time I was gardening, I'd get tomato plants in the summer and grow them or whatever, but as far as sprouting and figuring out seed and soaking and germination and success, what will work, and, I would say that was where I first realized that I can't sprout barley in the summer because it's way too hot. And then I also part of it, I used to have my so I went from the 5-gallon buckets to the tubs pretty fast, and so I had a stand where I'd have the legs down in tubs of water to keep the ants out of it.
Hmm.
But then I had to learn the hard way also that just because you can plant Milo in the field and grow it in the summer doesn't mean you can soak Milo and sprout it in the sun. It the tubs are black. I basically baked it and soured it. And so that was a whole, 2 or 3, I don't know how many weeks or months I, scratched my head and looked at it and had to figure it out because I was working full time. So I would do that in the morning. I'd go to work and I'd come home and say, well, what's going on? And so my area now is covered. It's in the shade because West Texas, the area where I have my grains set up, it's the west facing sun can get to it. And that is so hot and it will just bake them. And so my setup now is great. They're in the shade and everything grows really well. But like you were asking, yeah, I just had to learn and figure it out because we were shown and I realized early on what a value the sprouted grains are, how valuable they are, the nutrition. And I may not have stats as far as what enzymes are present or protein, etc. But when you feed something to your animals and you see the health and you see the vitality and you see the production, you say, well, there's evidence. I know this is good. And so this is a tool that I will continue to implement. This is priceless. This is valuable. I need to figure out how to make this work.
Yeah. How many birds did you have when you got started?
I don't know. I have no I've never I don't count my chickens. I just don't do that.
Yeah, it's
So
chicken math, right?
that's right. That's right. And when you don't count your chickens, no one can say you have too many. So
I love that. Oh, I'm gonna steal that from you.
I don't think that I had that many. It was,
Yeah.
let's see. My husband and I got married in 2008. And so, um, I might have had 20. I didn't have very many, and even my history with raising meat chickens and selling the meat. I did not grow up raising chickens. My parents got their first chickens whenever I showed chickens my senior year of high school. I was in ag my last 2 years of high school, so I wasn't a lot of this has been in my adulthood learning and getting into it, and, of course, I love it, and so I'm gonna continue doing it, but a lot of this has been an adulthood journey, not learning it growing up, and so, like I was saying, my kids raised meat chickens for 4-H first because they were too young for FFA, they were, adolescents, they were 10 and 12 years old, and so that was when we got our first plucker. It was, kind of stepping into the reality of where our food comes from, stepping
Right.
into how to take an animal into the thing you buy in the grocery store. That whole chicken that you go to the store and you get, no, you can produce it, you can do it yourself, and so, a lot of that has been a journey and, learning it slowly at first, but, getting it all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, being self-taught, you have to trial and
Mhm.
error and go, "Oh, I wish I had this thing," and then, "Oh, this thing's gonna work better. Oh, no, it's not." And,
Yes.
yeah, you start to kind of find your way.
Mhm.
That's so cool to hear. So it sounds like you were selling, meat birds before you found fodder. Is that accurate?
No, no,
No, okay.
we were introduced to fodder. I only had laying chickens, and it was just I just had them for fun. It didn't really matter to me how much they produced. It was kind of a novelty. You buy chickens and it's like, well, this one's gonna lay this color egg, that one's gonna be, and then you realize you can have all the different colored eggs because it's like a thing you're collecting instead of, you know what I mean? The novelty
Yeah.
of the variety, well, which one can I get and how big is that one going to be? And that one has fluffy cheeks and, that one has feathers on her legs and just getting into it and the novelty of the learning, getting into it, learning experience and figuring all that out.
Now I'm curious, one of the things that, kinda piqued my interest and
Mhm.
turned me on to what you're doing over there was something, I saw it on your TikTok video where you
Mhm.
mentioned that you're able to finish your broilers faster, compared to other people raising meat birds. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So interestingly enough, this winter was my first winter to raise meat birds through the winter. I've never actually bought chickens and intended to raise them during the freezing weather. We have winter is so unpredictable. You never know what the weather's going to be. Is it going to be temperate? Is it going to be just freezing? Is it going to be, are we going to get rain? Will we not get rain? Will it be, and all the elements that go into that. And so we managed to have just the right elements, just the right weather where I could consistently sprout grains with this first winter. I call it an experimental group almost.
Okay.
I'm coming into my 4th year selling chicken at the farmer's market and still probably always will be learning, figuring out. I go year to year and I say, what can I do better? Well, I was shocked. I expected this group. I thought, meat chickens. I did learn the hard way 2 falls in a row where I raised them and they grow super inconsistent. It just
Hmm,
I don't know what it is, same setup, same feed, the birds are all arrive at the same time, and I might have one finished at 2.5 pounds, and I might have one finished at 6 pounds. I don't understand it, and so I thought,
wow.
"Well, I'm gonna learn I will figure out how they do in the winter." And so I'm just going to my expectation was that they would take 10 weeks to finish because in the spring and summer, they were taking 8 weeks very consistently to finish. This last year, let me back up. 2024, yes, 2024, I raised about 200 meat chickens. 2025, I raised almost 800. So
Wow.
my fodder system couldn't keep up. I couldn't sprout enough. It's not set for production, which is the reason why in the middle of all of that, I could see that I wasn't able to provide. And I still raised them and sold them and the meat was good. That's still home raised is always going to be better than the store bought, just
Absolutely.
because it's not a huge factory farm and they still see sunlight and get bugs and get what chickens should get. But it's just without the fodder, it's not the same. And so that's why I'm looking at changing my fodder system, because when you see the evidence, you say, well, they have to have this. This is non negotiable. This is a building block of them. This is so important. Anyway, so over the winter, I thought, okay, spring and summer, 8 weeks. 8 weeks consistently, they're finished. I'm going to give them 2 more weeks, because typically in February, we're going to have some kind of freezing, harsh weather. And we had the freeze in the end of January this year. And the electrical out to their house, which they still had their heat lamps because it was very cold. And even though they're in a house and have bedding, I still want to make sure that they're going to be okay and comfortable, because if they're not comfortable, they're not going to grow. Their electric actually fried out there on the coldest morning we had during that freeze.
Oh
And they were
man.
fine.
Oh no.
They were fine. Broilers run
Yeah.
hot, but through the winter, they had their fodder. And so I had expected to give them 10 weeks to finish. And so I actually had to make notes to try to remember everything. At 8 weeks, this first winter group, at 8 weeks, their finished weight was average 5.5 pounds.
Wow.
The following week I finished them, the average weight was close to 7, and that's processed, which they
Wow,
were
that's
monsters. And so
phenomenal.
I sold at a small farmer's market 2023, 2024, and then I was able to move to the Abilene farmer's market, and everything that I produced last year, I sold out, and I had customers coming back saying, "This is the best chicken I've ever had. Um, I want more." And I said, "Sorry, it's seasonal. I don't have any." So that's the reason why I pushed myself to do a winter group, because I thought, you know, based on the hatchery schedule, I can't get chicks before the end of January. That's their schedule. They're not available. And so I thought, in the middle of December, I'm going to get a group. And so, I had customers coming to me saying, well, I want a whole chicken. And I said, they're way too big. I'm very sorry. Like, I had to apologize for having giant chickens because of the fodder. So, thankfully, based on the Department of State Health Services here in Texas, I am allowed to sell not just whole chickens. I can do all the parts. So I can do breasts, drumsticks, wings, all the parts. I had half chickens that I was selling that were 3.5 pounds. It was normally, I try for my whole chickens that I produce to be 4 pounds approximately, so it might be 3.5 pounds, might be 4.5, but I don't want to have a 5 pounder, just because for most families, when you think of cooking a whole chicken, you want one that's going to be a one meal deal. Not a lot of people don't do leftovers. And so if you sell them a whole chicken that's going to be more than a meal, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I want to have a product for my customers that works for their intentions, for their how they want to use it.
I love that. I love that. Your customers are some of the best feedback.
Absolutely.
And I imagine that encourages you to start going,
Yes.
chicken math.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I raised about 700 last year. I had some losses because of the lack of fodder in the fall, but I'm going to be doing just over 1,100 this year. So, and I have
Wow.
brought in help because I cannot process all of that. I can process it on my own, and then I'm going to want to go lay down for 4 days.
Yeah.
So I
It's a
I
lot of
have
work.
friends that want to help, that they want free meat, and so we kind of barter, and I train them, of course. This is my system to my specs to, what my customers expect, so that the it's consistent, so that their chicken is the same every time.
So you went from a small farmer's market and you found a bigger farmer's market. Now I
Yes.
imagine I'm curious, where do you think you'll find yourself maybe in a year, a couple of years? Multiple farmers markets, training other people to run these stands for you, or what are your thoughts on that?
I I don't expect to be changing farmers markets. The Abilene farmers market, they have enough customers that come through. And honestly, the great thing about gaining customers at the farmers market is I'm able to, like contact information, because I say, because they learned the hard way. Well, I guess we all learned the hard way last year, that I was going to sell out fast because most people do prefer the parts, chicken breast, chicken thighs, whatever it would be, and I would sell out. And so I get contact information and hand business cards out, and I say, if you know what you want before the market arrives, reach out to me and let me know. And I tell them, the market is 8 until noon. You don't have to be here at 8 o'clock whenever the market opens. As long as you always show up like you say you will, I will hold your meat for you. And so that way, um, offering that flexibility for the customers lets them, well, A, have confidence that they're going to have the meat that they're looking for. But um, to go back to your question, that I believe offering that to the customers allows my business to grow because, you want consistency in availability, you want consistency in quality. So it lets them order and it lets me bring everything else I can to the market and sell it. I sold out everything last year. And so I expect the same thing this year. I guess what I'm looking at is, so Texas says, based on the guidelines I have to follow, a small poultry producer is 10,000 birds or less, which I can't even fathom. I'm going to do 1,100. And I'm just like, when do I get vacation? It's just, I love doing it. It's just a lot of work. And so it's not for everybody. But working within the guidelines that I have, I do want to see what I can do to grow. I don't think that I'm going to have to go to multiple farmers markets. I think a lot of what I'm going to need to look at is where I offer for someone to text or message me and say, hey, here's what I want. I do occasionally drop off at somebody's house or I'll meet them in town if I'm not going to be at the market. Working with them, what I've used so far, I could see that I could grow and still stay local and still not have to go very far. I did get into a farmer's market near Dallas last year. And I went once. I went at the very beginning of the season. I didn't have chicken ready yet. And so I just took, I make ferments also. I do sauerkraut, kimchi, other vegetables. Took that and some freeze dried stuff. And I had plans to do both farmers markets because that one is once a month. But once I was at the Abilene farmers market, and people realized I have chicken, then I didn't have product to sell because I was selling out here. And so I see growth possible locally, where I can reach out to people in the surrounding community, and it would allow me to grow and to as much as I want to. I don't uh, I don't have plans to process 10,000 chickens in a year, but it lets me know that I can do probably whatever I want to, whatever parameters I want to set, whatever I want to grow into, I see being possible locally and hopefully being satisfied with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have a lot of room to work within the Texas guidelines before you have to
Yeah.
kind of go have a new learning curve at 10,000 birds or whatever that may mean
Yeah.
from a business and an operational perspective.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's fantastic to hear. You
Yeah.
go from a couple hundred ish birds
Yeah.
to over 1,000 birds in a short amount of time. It sounds like.
Yes.
Do you find a lot of your growth has been like very organically, like word of mouth? Because it sounds like your customers just rave about
Mhm.
what they're
Mhm.
getting from you.
Yes. Yes, very organically. I think so. The Abilene Farmers Market has been around since the 1980s. I think it's 1982. They have multiple beef producers, and they've got some grass-fed beef and lamb. I'm the only person who brings poultry, and
Oh,
so yeah, there's nobody else in the market. There are people who would do things locally around here from their home and sell some, but there's nobody who brings anything consistently. There's no one else who brings anything to the Abilene Farmers Market, let alone consistently. And so it leaves a lot to, I guess, anticipate as far as the possibility for growth and sales. which is great because, I don't have a lot of freezers, and so I really need to sell what I produce. And I'm set right now to process about 30 or 35 birds a week. Actually starting out because of the freezing weather, the week of the freeze, they didn't ship anything. I had a order that was supposed to ship. And the following week, my order shipped, but somebody left them out and they froze. And out of 70 birds,
Mm,
I kept 3. Yes. And so the
sorry about
following
that.
week, I got replacements. And so the following week, I got 70 more. And so I'm about to I've been telling my customers, "Well, we're about to be drowning in chicken, and so don't worry, we're gonna have plenty." We're gonna have plenty. So I'm actually planning to, hopefully towards the end of next week, process my first group. They should be 6 weeks old at that time. They're a little bit small right now, and so, I feel like I'm still in the middle of learning how these birds are going to grow, especially when I can consistently give them the sprouted grains. Because I know it makes a difference in their growth and their health and the quality of their meat. But they just make, it can be challenging to look at the birds while they're still alive and say, okay, they're big enough, or okay, they're going to be this size processed, or, you know, they have to have the expectations. Even though I've been doing this for going on 4 years, I still feel like I'm still figuring out how to eyeball them and see, how big they're gonna be processed, and, like, what the final product is gonna be.
What breed are you, or what variety are you raising primarily?
Everything that I do is Cornish cross.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're the fast grow broiler. There's fast grow broilers, slow grow broilers. There's the red rangers, which are meant to, free range, which I guess probably the slow grow broilers are also, it's just that some are red and some are white, which I'm sure the red ones dress out just fine as far as the appearance of the finished product is, not having any, because when you look at your food, it needs to be nutrition and taste good, but, we do eat with our eyes. It needs to look
Yeah.
good. It needs to be pretty, and so I'm curious about if the red broilers dress out as well. I do know we actually did a comparison a few years ago. I used to actually work at the local feed store. Our family was partial owners, and so Nutrina came to us and said, we want to do a comparison of these birds, and so we raised slow grow and fast grow broilers at the same time, same feed, everything. I think at that time I didn't have time to watch them and to do the work, and so I actually had a friend who raised them for us, and she did sprout grains as well as giving them the feed, and so, the meat of the slow grow broilers is good, they just don't put on the same they don't have the same muscle mass of the Cornish cross, and so, looking at that, I've actually been really pleased with the growth and their health and vitality. I think that's probably one of the reasons why the sprouted grains are so important to me is knowing these birds, and they're great meat producers, and their feed conversion rate is great. But when you have that, you do give up some aspects of health. So
Yeah.
they are not the hardiest birds. And so, making sure that they have the sprouted grains gives them that quality of life, I would say, the happiness and the health and having the best life possible, is another aspect of one of the reasons why having the fodder is so important.
Yeah, I've seen similar things, and I haven't dove into the broiler world. I'm still an egg layer, if you will.
Mm, yeah.
But I have seen, with the Cornish and the Red Rangers and some of the differences in it, and the Cornishes they're just funny. They're just
Yeah.
funny creatures. You look at one
Yeah.
of them wrong and they just fall over, or
Yeah.
I
They do.
imagine in your case they grow faster than expected, and you see some of those other
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you feeding out your fodder? You just scatter feed it, or you have a trough, or do you? Yeah, tell me about that.
So I actually, as long as I can get it before, so I just water it in the tubs, and so it does tend to get basically a mat of roots if I let it get too old. And of course, so I try to get it when It's probably about 3 days old, and so it does have some roots, but it's not like a tough mat. And so, I have figured out with the broilers, once I got them on it and they realize how much they like it. They're gravitating towards it. I actually get the sprouts that are about 3 days old. They don't have too much of a root mat to them, and so I'm actually able to set it out in chunks, and so it's not, for lack of a better way to say it, it's not so woven together with the roots that they can't just pull it apart. One of the things that, I have learned through my time raising chickens is sometimes they need a little what you would call a boredom buster. Something that if they're in their house and they're bored, what can I pick at? Because chickens aren't always very nice to each other, they'll pick on each other and they can, I mean, they could be like little carnivores. I know they're omnivores, but I don't know if you've seen in your own flock, if one of them gets a sore and your chickens don't have a thing to occupy them, they're going to go pick on that chicken that has a
Yep.
sore. They need something out to be doing, and so I like that I can find the fodder whenever it's very young, and I can put chunks of it out, and the birds have had enough of it that they just crave it. So whatever they're doing, if they're under their huddled in the corner together, hanging out, sleeping, once one of them gets up and starts eating, um, I need to record when I feed them in their house because it goes from quiet to just almost deafening with how loud they get because they get
It's
so
like
excited
chaos.
about it. I set little chunks of it out, and so they're able to pick it apart and make use of it. So, in that piece that I give them, you're going to have some that are more sprouted, some that are less sprouted. So they all kind of get whatever they prefer as far as the more growth or less growth. But it usually has maybe a centimeter or two of growth whenever I feed it to them that way.
Okay. Now, are you feeding only fodder or do you feed anything else with them besides, it sounds like they free range as well, right?
So my meat birds I keep in. I don't have their yard set up yet. I have the Premier One. Are you familiar with that brand?
Yeah.
Premier One. They have different net fencing that you can set up. I set up a yard for them, which last year was my first year to do it. The first 2023, 2024, I just had a pen that I would use. And so I didn't 2025 was my first year to raise them just almost all year from the first time that I can get them until about September. My last group I got at the end of August last year, and so I finished them out in October, which kind of overlapped when I had my turkeys. But I prefer to have my meat birds in a pen because my other chickens are free range. I do tend to cater more to my meat animals than I do my layers, just because if they're going to be confined, they're going to get every bit of nutrition that I can offer them. So they're the first ones to get the fodder. They're the first ones to get extra probiotics. They're the first ones to get, because I think I want them to have, quality of life. I want them to have vitality. I want them to have nutrition. Their yard that they were in last year, they actually had some grass. And so they did get to free range some, but they don't get, like my layer flock has over an acre they can run around on. So they can
Yeah.
go, I have a garden area, and I've got my house. And so it's almost like a U shape around my house. My front towards the road, I have a yard that they can go up in. I have an alleyway that goes next to my garden. And then I have their houses. And then I'm almost like a big horseshoe because back over here, my front yard, side alley, and then I've got my waterfowl area. So they have acreage that they can go on. But my meat birds, I keep in a pen. Also because if they're gonna be building meat, I don't want them running around burning energy. I want them in growing, making meat so that I can process them, so I can produce them for my customers.
Yeah. Now, do you offer them any other type of feed or is it like 100% fodder?
I would love to do 100% fodder. They have free choice. I feed them Nutrient Meat Bird. It's a
Okay.
22% crumble. It's good formula. They do well on it. But I can go fill their feeders, and if I come in 5 minutes later and they're eating their feed, as soon as they see a bucket or a tub or something with fodder, they're leaving that feed. that feed no longer exists. I bring the fodder in and they stop.
Yeah.
So they have free choice feed all the time, but they will leave their feed for their fodder. They will finish their fodder and then they will go back to their feed if they're still hungry.
It's just a testament,
Mm,
to what you're feeding. And
yeah,
as you alluded to at the beginning, paying attention to your birds, what they need and what they don't need.
yeah,
It tells you a lot more than scientific studies or research studies tend to look at, because you're
yeah,
there, you're living with them, you're hyper involved, and it also hints at a little bit of what's in that feed, even though it
yeah,
is quality formulation and all of that stuff. I've seen, and through doing a lot of the different research for what I've done on fodder, the benefits of fodder just make anything else you're feeding so much more nutritious, so much
yeah,
healthier.
yeah,
And so them going back and forth, or rather, choosing the fodder first, just I imagine just stretches that other feed out a lot.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it does, and I'm gonna say as a mixture of the fodder and the probiotic that I have them on, I don't know if you've heard of Star Labs, they're in Missouri.
I have
They
not
have
heard
a
of them.
probiotic called Primalac, and they've
Okay.
got a formulation for pigeons, and they've got a formulation for chickens, and it's actually the same probiotic, it's just a different carrier because I think chickens don't have a lot of a preference for what they eat. They'll eat just almost whatever, you offer them. I think the pigeons are the ones with the more discerning that they have to change what's the carrier for the probiotic. But that actually they have done studies and they have raised birds and done necropsies, and they have proven with this probiotic a lower parasite load naturally, more eggs on less feed, resistance to salmonella and E. coli, I believe. And so combination of that and the fodder 100%, if I'm ever without either of them, my birds get sick just because there's too many things that come through. They've gotta I shut my birds up at night, but during the day when things are open, rodents can come through or, other birds can come through and they spread bacteria and germs if they share their water. And so between the fodder and the probiotic, there's a there's a absolutely noticeable difference in the health of my flock.
It's like nature's medicine, just
Yes.
grown
Yeah.
fresh right on site.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
I've been raising and selling turkeys for probably about 7 years probably, and, I had a group a few years ago. I bet it was towards the beginning of my time raising them. That if you ever seen, poultry get the respiratory infection where their sinuses swell up and, their faces swell up.
Yeah.
I used to start my turkeys on meat bird and change them over to a hardy hen because I wanted to offer a no soy product, which I've quit doing that now. I'm not sure that the market demands a no soy poultry
Okay.
product, their meat. Um, However, at that time, that's what I was doing. And when I switched my turkeys from the crumble to the pellets, I had a few that were having the swollen face issue. And typically with poultry, when they do that, you almost can't fix them. Even if you get antibiotics, if the inflammation just almost never goes away in their faces. Well, this group refused to eat the pellets, but they still had their fodder. And I watched in a number of days, all their faces went back to normal.
Wow.
All the inflammation left their
That's
bodies. And
so
so,
cool.
through any inconsistencies that I've had in myself as far as my schedule, my attention or lack of attention to keeping the fodder system going, I always go back to that and I say, if that's the one thing you can see, what is happening in their bodies that you can't see? If you can see this
Mhm.
evidence, what can you not see? What about their digestive tract? What about the rest of their bodies? What about their meat? And go down the line. What other benefits are happening with them that you can't see that are not as obvious as that?
Yeah. I tend to think about the, like, as within, so without, as
Mhm,
without, so within. And,
mhm.
like you said, there's a lot of unseen things, but, seeing some of those things that are, quote unquote, uncurable, kind of a
Yes,
death sentence
yes,
to some of these birds. And then you see this rapid transformation and this turnaround. It does, it
yes,
does make one wonder, what's going on inside.
Mhm.
for good or for bad, but it sounds like it's, mostly good.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. It's just a very enlightening conversation. I just
Yeah.
absolutely pleased. If folks wanted to look you up, or if they, wanted to learn more about you, where might they find your stomping ground?
So if you want to find my content online, of course, there's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram automatically cross posts from Facebook because they do that. Locally, I'm at the Abilene Farmers Market. That's really the only market that I use. And I'm not around there in the winter, but I will be there throughout the spring and summer. I have plans to be there to have chicken. I do also have my ferments that I produce, the sauerkrauts. I make about four kinds of sauerkraut, like four kinds of kimchi, other
Mhm.
other fermented vegetables because health and wellness is important to me, and that starts with your diet. So having good, clean raised meat, the poultry that I raise, having the ferments is very important. It's a great building block to your nutrition and your well being.
Yeah. Food is thy medicine, I believe, is something that many of us seem to believe in. And you said it a little bit earlier in the show. We are what we eat, and we are what our animals eat. And yeah, it's just, if I
Mhm.
if I find myself down in
Absolutely.
your area, I will be at the Abilene Farmers Market. I will, stand in line or get on the wait list and come back if I have to get a bird. Before I let you go, is there anything else that
Yeah.
you wanted to share, or any questions, or things you wanted to let the folks out there know?
Yes. So, I did make one more note. Anybody who wants to start sprouting for their birds, my experience, especially if you are looking to raise meat chickens on fodder, my experience has been if I don't start before they're about 2 or 3 weeks old, they typically don't pick it up. Meat
Okay.
birds are. I'm trying to remember when I started with my laying flock back in 2013. They were slow to pick it up as well. My experience in poultry, they're not the most open-minded creatures. Um, but the meat birds, once you get them on 'em on the fodder, if you'll start early, I actually my group that I got 4 weeks ago, I let them be in the floor with all the rest of the birds. I had to think back. I started them the week that they came in, so they were days old when they got on fodder, and so my only concern I had at that point was, are they big enough to actually swallow what I'm giving them? And of course they were fine, they're doing great, but they just once they get on it, they'll go nuts over it, and they'll prefer it over every other food that you can offer them.
Start early, get your birds addicted to the fodder, and just change the
Yes.
way we raise chickens. I love that. I love
Yes.
that. Well, Jessica, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Sharing a wealth of knowledge
Yeah.
for out there for folks that are interested in meat birds and raising
Yeah,
anything else with feathers. It sounds like fodder is just the best thing since sliced bread.
absolutely.
Oh man, just what you're doing is just so awesome. Like honestly, like to hear
Thank you.
the ins and outs of what you're doing, how you're doing it, the fact that it's not
Yeah.
there's no standard operating procedure for doing this. Part of my motivation for writing, for talking, and speaking with other people is so that we can come together and build some more congruency around what it is that we're doing and how to talk about this. Because
Yeah.
for folks down in your area in the South, it's a way different challenge learning
Mhm.
how your birds mature over the time compared to somebody, say, in Montana, where they get barley all the
Yeah.
time or they can grow it year round differently. But then they have
Mhm.
a winter where they probably can't, grow birds out of. And then, of course, it sounds like hatcheries. Have you ever thought of trying to hatch your own broilers, or is that you're like, nah?
I I haven't, but only because I don't think that the number that I wanna raise, the number of birds that I wanna produce, and how I want to be able to grow my production, um, I don't see how I could produce enough eggs to hatch to make the birds you see what I'm saying?
Yep, yep.
That
You're
would
gonna have to
be
have a
that would be a
whole hatchery just for your own
that
operation.
that'd be a
Uh,
whole new setup, that'd be a whole new house, that'd be a whole new group of chickens, and hope that they lay enough, hope that I can feed them enough that they lay enough, that I have the eggs to hatch out.
yeah,
So it would
actually,
be very challenging.
so my background's in genetics,
Mm,
and then I do some ag education and stuff like that. So I have this proclivity to want to like breed chickens, and very much like you and others out
mhm.
there that get chickens, I was like, ooh, that's a pretty chicken. Ooh, that chicken gives me these kind of
Yeah,
eggs.
yeah,
Ooh, she lays more, she lays less.
yeah.
So I'm in the process of breeding my own blue layer. It's gonna have a
Okay.
point of lay around like 4.5 months, and then a
Oh,
blue
wow.
egg every day. I have a lot of the homesteaders out there. They want those heritage designer chickens, and of course, as you know,
Yes.
for whatever reason, people will pay a lot more for colored eggs, or at
Mhm.
least
Yeah.
demand those eggs differently. And great. So I actually tried to save some of my Cornish giants, or
Yeah.
jumbo Cornishes, thinking that I was going to get into the hatching meat bird phase of my life. And very, very quickly, I was like, there's so much different. You have to literally try to raise them differently. You can't feed them the same. You can't confine them the
Yeah.
same. Of course, you need a rooster if you want to keep the similar genetics. And I haven't yet found someone who's like, oh yeah, here's a Cornish rooster for you, so you can go ahead and do all of that. And so much like you're saying, let the experts out there that are mass producing these things at those levels, let's let them, because they've got it down for a pat, and you can say for cold events, which I'm sure
Mm,
surprises a lot of people, that it gets cold in Texas. There's that
yeah.
misconception that it's always hot there.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dry cold and wet cold, they feel completely different. You know, it's
Yeah.
very arid here. Although with Colorado, you're gonna have the elevation difference as well, but the humidity changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only lived in one humid place really in my life. I lived in Hawaii for a little bit, and so it was like night and day compared to Colorado. Have you lived in
Yeah.
that area for most of your life, or are you from there originally?
I've lived here most of my life.
Yeah,
It's a good place to live. I mean, I don't know that I would move and go somewhere else. Um, but of course, whenever your family is all where you are, then it kind of holds you in place. So,
yeah, yeah. And with what you're building down there, it sounds like
mhm.
some of your customers are probably becoming similar to family or akin to
Yes.
those things, and you get to. It's one thing that I love personally about the farmers market is you get to have all of this interaction with
Mm,
people, and you get to hear their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and
mhm.
then make like real time pivots. Did that kind of influence like your directions? Or did you have a lot of like squiggly lines to get where you are?
So starting out with my experience at the farmers market, I don't even know that I originally had planned to sell anything at a farmer's market. You know, I had a
Wow.
full-time job, we were at the feed store, and, I learned that business, and I had my hats that I wore in that business, and so I had a clear direction of what I was doing, and then we chose to change our direction basically in life. Christmas 2022, my daughter knows that I like to learn how to make things and figuring out how to make things
Okay.
happen, and so she said, "You know what I want is tallow balm," and I was like, "What is tallow balm?" And so I figured it out, and I made them some for Christmas, and then we left the feed store at the end of 2022, and, a farmer's market opened up in Buffalo Gap, which was literally a 7-minute drive from my house.
Oh wow.
Very close, very easy to
Yeah.
get to, brand new market, and I thought, "Well, that sounds fun." I've I've made sauerkraut for probably 10 years, off and on 10 years, and, it when we left the feed store, it turned out my hobbies, my things that I've kind of dabbled in, I can make money with it. And so the sauerkraut, I could sell sauerkraut because it's a cottage product. Just like the people who wanna sell bread, sourdough, baked goods, fermented foods fall in those same guidelines. And so I could make different sauerkrauts and sell them. And so I was doing that. And then I've raised chickens with one of my friends, we split the cost and, she might start them and I might finish them or, which is usually how it goes because I have the plucker, you don't want to, although I've put my plucker in the back of my truck and taken it to her house, but that's not a lot of fun, hauling a 150 pound, figuring out how to get it in my truck. And then, that was
And then all
just,
the other stuff you got to bring with to get
yes,
the plucking prep
yes.
done. Yeah.
And so, that was a whole season in my life. And then, um, once I looked into the requirements by the state of Texas, and finding out how to obtain the permits to legally raise, process, and sell chicken, in Texas, you can sell it off your property, and it's the same as selling a bird, a live bird, a laying hen. It's the same. You can sell it off your property, no permits required. But as soon as you want to take it off your property and sell it somewhere else, like a
Hmm.
farmer's market, there are permits required. And because of the location of the farmer's market, it was not in the city. And so I had to Google and call all different departments with the DSHS, the state health department, and figuring out the rules and regulations and all of that. Um, so where I am now versus where I started in 2023, um, this is not anything I planned on, to say the least. Um, but I'm very much a doer, and I like to make things and make things happen and produce things, and getting to see your efforts and how your efforts work out. For example, the fodder, providing the fodder, figuring out, going season to season, what will grow, how it will grow, how well it will grow, or how well it won't grow. Doing all of that and learning has been a journey in itself. But yeah, I raised 2023 maybe 100 chickens and sold them. 2024, I don't even remember how many. So stepping it up the way that I've done, it just, you figure out what the best avenue is, I would say, what the most profitable, not necessarily money, but like what works the best,
Yeah.
what has the most reward. People really want locally produced, clean chicken.
There's a
There's a
huge
real demand
movement.
for it.
Yeah.
I
For
know I
local
like it
food.
better than the store. It's not
Yeah.
even the same. If you raise your own and then go back to the store, you think, well, okay, what is this that I'm eating? It doesn't taste the same.
It's night and day with what you're feeding. And I know from
Mhm.
my small experiments on my side with broilers, there's nothing compared to it. And when I eat chicken out, at a restaurant or something like that, you know, I, I'm a little bit snobbish. I turn my
Mhm.
nose up
Yeah.
at it, and that is the coolest thing that you've said in the holistic picture is just kind of your rapid growth and how you
Mhm.
dove in and learned all of this and all of this.
Yeah.
That's a huge testament to you as an individual,
Mhm.
a huge blessing in your community.
Yes. That's my
That's so
plan.
cool. That's so cool. Well, again, I want to be very mindful of your time. I know you're a busy lady, so thank you again for being here. I wish
Yeah.
you all of the best of luck. I would love to keep in touch
Absolutely.
through TikTok, through email, through whatever makes sense. Cool. Well, thank you again.
Okay. You're welcome.
Take care and have a lovely day.
Thanks. Okay. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
That is all I have for us today. If you want to learn more about what Jessica is doing, you can find her on TikTok or Facebook or the Abilene Farmers Market. I've linked all of that in the show notes below. And if you want to dive deeper on hydroponic fodder and the bigger picture behind it, grab a copy of my book, Thinking Outside the Soil. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss the next episode and your chance to be part of the next agricultural revolution. Thanks again for spending some time with us today. Join us again on another episode. Take care and have a lovely day.